I am. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, thanks for being
Awesome.
here.
Yeah, just want to start off say thanks everybody for allowing me to participate via Zoom. A lot of familiar names on this call, and so I just appreciate everybody's hard work and collaboration with our office during the Winter Storm Project cleanup work and the Green Waste Bin program. Those are relatively new programs to us, so without your participation, we wouldn't have been successful at all. And so I know there's a lot of bumps in the road along the way, but I feel like we did a great job in mitigating a lot of fuels hazards in the county. So I want to start off by just, we're going to dive into Zone Zero. As mentioned before, it's the most critical part of defensible space to protect your structure. As I was a wildland firefighter for about 8 years with the Forest Service, and when we were assigned structure protection, if somebody did not do any work on their own, like as mentioned before, we just passed it right by up. We weren't going to sit there for hours and perform your defensible space for you when the neighboring property may have, done a great job, and that was defensible for firefighters to make a stand. So this is a huge part in protecting your own home and improving safety for first responders. So I'm going to share my screen and start the presentation real quick. So I've sent a request. All right.
Thank you. Oh, thanks.
Is it sharing right now? I can't really tell.
Thought I had allow. Try now. Try again.
See it. All right. Yeah, let me escape real quick.
Let me stop sharing this one.
He's not showing as a co-host yet, so
All right. I think I got
he needs to be made a co-host. There he goes. Thank
All
you.
right.
I see it.
Cool. All right. So with this topic, we're going to really hone in on Zone Zero. There's a lot to the other parts of the ordinance, but I know there was a lot of questions around Zone Zero. One thing I do want to say beforehand is, there's 5 jurisdictions in the county that can enforce Zone Zero. I'm speaking specifically for Nevada County. I do recommend that you get in touch with your local fire agency or authority who enforces Zone Zero, and then consult with them on any specifics. But overall, I feel like I've captured the majority of what it's about, and at least the concept behind it.
Ricky, will your slides show which of those 5 jurisdictions you're referring to?
At the very end, I have a slide with those jurisdictions.
Okay, thanks.
Let me see if I had to chat. Oopsie. All right. So when it comes to Nevada County Ordinance 2521, the first thing I want to go over is, the first section was to maintain defensible space of 100 feet around the structure. And fuels, sorry, hold on. Sorry about that. There we go. Fuel should be maintained in conditions so wildfire burning under average weather conditions would be unlikely to ignite the structure. And that's direct language from PRC 4291. And I feel like bringing that concept up, or that point of average weather condition, is a huge factor when we're talking about defensible space. So what is average weather condition? Well, there's no definition for it, but I'm going to interpret that being at moderate humidity, moderate temperatures, and light wind. When I think of not average weather conditions, I'm thinking low humidities, high temperatures, high winds, conducive of your red flag warnings or fire weather watches, which I just rattled off probably the last couple months of summer. Right here, we have a graphic of the weather risk outlook from the National Weather Service. And you can see there, there's major and extreme risk levels, and those are considered, in my opinion, to be not average weather conditions. So when we think of defensible space, the reason why that's in there, in my opinion, is when you have these extreme weather conditions, there's not much you can do to stop a wildfire from burning down structures. We saw that in, the campfire. We saw that in Lahaina. Very strong winds, low humidity, and high temperatures. There's not much you can do there. So the ordinance really revolves around what can you do when conditions aren't totally against you, right? You're going to go in the ring with Mike Tyson one-on-one in his prime. You're probably not going to walk out very well. So, what can we do under normal burning conditions, under normal weather conditions, to defend your house? So when we think of fire weather conditions, in this picture right here, I'm showing, we had a prescribed fire on a property earlier in the spring. We had moderate humidities, almost a little too high to burn, very moderate temperatures, pretty cool air temps still, and very light winds. You can see here the smoke, there's literally almost no drift because the winds are so light. So these are the typical conditions, that we look at to see, to kind of think about, defensible space as to what can you do that'll be effective in these conditions. When we think of not average weather conditions, here's a picture of a red flag warning. I believe this is the smoke that was rolling in from the North Complex a few years back. Once again, red flag warnings. In these type of conditions, your standard defensible space requirements are probably not going to do much to stop a wildfire from affecting your structure. So just be mindful of that. The more the better. But when it comes to the ordinance and enforcement, this is what we're looking at. Once again, here's the campfire. You can tell that the winds are extremely high. The fire is very narrow. This is very typical of wind-driven fires. It doesn't really spread out in a circle evenly. This is like high intensity, high wind event where it's very narrow, and anything in that path is going to get greatly affected. So we move on to zone 0. Part of the ordinance, section 4.01.040.c.10. I know that's a mouthful there. And that says to maintain a 5-foot ember-resistant zone around structures and underneath decks, stairs, porches, or other combustible material attached to structures. So once again, there's a term there, ember-resistant zone. What does that really mean? So in our ordinance, we do have the definitions for it. Ember-resistant zone means an area free of combustible material, hazardous vegetation, or vegetation debris located close to a structure that can result in either radiant heat or direct flame contact exposure to the structure. So here's a really good graphic to show what direct flame contact looks like. It's pretty obvious. If something can burn and the flames touch the structure, you have direct flame contact. That's one form of heat transfer, right? The middle graphic is just an ember storm, kind of like give you an idea of what that would look like in an oncoming wildfire. But then we also want to look at radiant heat, right? So is there something in that 5-foot zone that can produce enough radiant heat, not direct flame contact, but radiant heat to affect the structure or, cause constant exposure to the structure? So those are two really big key items, I think, when it comes to zone 0. Can you have stuff in zone 0? Sure. But more than likely, if you do, it's gonna violate one of these two things, right? It's either gonna burn and the flames are gonna touch the structure, or it's gonna burn and it's gonna have enough radiant impact, radiant heat to impact the structure. So when we look at zone 0, again, we're talking about ember resistant zones. So we want to really focus on embers being a source of ignition. Here's a graphic of a long exposure photo, probably not that long of an exposure, to show the onslaught of embers against the structure, right? There's thousands of embers in this one frame. And you can imagine the millions of embers, trying to light your structure on fire or try to light the vegetation around the structure on fire. So that's just to give it an idea that, what the ember storm really looks like and how many sources of ignition that is. Imagine that being matches. Every single one of those is a match that's lit and trying to burn your house down. So here's a good graphic on two similar structures, same exact building, but what's different is vegetation, right? So on the left-hand side, you have very typical vegetation around houses, right? It's well maintained. It looks good. There's pretty plants around. There's nice juniper trees up against the windows, maybe for privacy, maybe for shade. In my opinion, this is roughly almost every house in the county, right? And very few times does it look like the right side, where there's, the 5-foot zone is hardscaped, no vegetation, and that's kind of what we're looking for, right? There's not much there that can ignite, or I don't even think there is anything there that can ignite that would cause direct flame contact, or even radiant heat that would affect the structure. But on the left-hand side, we got a lot of problems. We have a lot of ignition sources. We have a lot of vegetation. We have most of that vegetation will cause direct flame impact, let alone, if it is far enough away to not cause direct flame impact, it's going to cause radiant heat, to that structure. Here's just another graphic to show that 5-foot, what we're really looking for, and the ultimate goal is just 5 feet of hardscape. These graphics, they look really good. It looked low maintenance from a homeowner standpoint. And so it should be highly encouraged. I know, we're just really used to decorative plants and shrubs and whatnot, small trees around our house. But it's time to start really focusing on that shift to hardscape around the 5-foot perimeter of your house. It looks clean, it's easy to maintain, and there's just multiple benefits to it, other than it being the most critical point to saving a structure. So here we are talking about, just ember resistance zones again. Here's a picture of a house we inspected earlier this year. And as a DSAV, as Firewise community, you're asking, people are coming to you for input, and you come up on a structure that looks like this. It's very obvious what needs to be done, right? This is pretty obvious that there's, hazardous vegetation. There's, debris that could cause direct flame impact. And there's debris here that could cause radiant heat. So, sorry, I keep clicking buttons. So it's pretty obvious what this person needs to do. And there's a lot of work to be done here. So we want to also focus on the hazardous vegetation definition in our ordinance, and that includes material that in its natural state will readily ignite, which is everything you see in this photo, burn and transmit fire from native or landscape plants to any structure, which is all the plants in this photo. And also includes, but not limited to dry grass, leaves, brush, weeds, green waste, dead or dying trees, low-hanging branches, litter or other flammable vegetation that create a fire hazard. So we have cardboard boxes, trash, other very receptive fuels in this photo. So this is like the ultimate violation of Zone 0. Not much is going to save this structure with even a low intensity fire. But we were able to work with the homeowner and get some. Sorry, got to do that again. We were able to work with the homeowner, and they were able to remove a lot of that vegetation. It's the same structure. They finished the roof. They removed a lot of the fuels. This picture is night and day, and this is kind of what we're looking for. Yes, there's a brush right there that I don't know why they kept. It probably could have gone without it. But in this case, embers, in my opinion, are going to have a hard time lighting that on fire. And if it was to catch on fire, it may not have enough flames to directly impact the structure, let alone radiant heat to affect the side of that structure. So that's the difference we're looking for. And this is the direction we want to really take people and just steer them in that direction. So now we get into some better, kind of more standard structures that we come across during our inspections. This is pretty typical of almost every house in the county. On the left-hand side is part of the demonstration that CAL FIRE put on. I don't know if you guys, I'm sure most of you guys have seen the video of the structures, defensible space, this on the left-hand side versus the one that has hardscaped around it. These are very typical of houses in the county. So, on the left-hand side, you have, decorative bark and mulch up against the house, T111 siding, leaves on the roof, green irrigated shrubs next to the house, and like a juniper plant next to the house as well, and also a wooden fence. So, like I said, very typical. But then there's a lot of issues that come along with this style of landscaping. This is the result of the demonstration. They lit off a couple spots in front of the structures and just let nature take its course. And obviously the house on the left burned down to nothing, while the one on the right withstood all the impacts and was completely fine.
So the one on the left is the one that you just showed us with the wooden fence and all the rest, and the little plants. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to show you guys a short video by CAL FIRE at the end that'll show the effects of the fires that happened. So so as a DSAV, what can you suggest or tell people who are asking you for assistance or guidance? I would go to CAL FIRE's website on fire.ca.gov.dspace, and it has a section there for Zone 0. So start close to your home to be ember resistant.
All dead and dying plants from 5 feet.
Yep. Yeah. So the first 5 feet from your home is most important. Keeping the area close to the building structures and decks clear will prevent embers from igniting materials that can spread fire to your home. Why? The majority of homes lost in wildfire ignited by flying embers. Embers can travel miles ahead of the active fire front of wildfires. We see that all the time with mile-plus long range spotting. So, you know, what should they do? You know, use hardscapes like gravel, pavers, or concrete, and say no to combustible bark or mulch. I know it looks good, it's easy, it's cheap, but it could really negatively impact your house. Remove all dead and dying plants, weeds, and debris, leaves and needles from your roof, gutter, deck, porch, stairways, and under areas of your home. Remove all branches within 10 feet of any chimney or stovepipe outlet. Once again, several of these things fall under our standard defensible space ordinance as well as separate violations. To keep going, you know, you want to limit combustible items like outdoor furniture and planters on top of decks. Relocate firewood and lumber out of zone 2. And replace combustible fencing, gates, and arbors attached to the home with non-combustible alternatives. Consider relocating garbage and recycling containers outside this zone, and consider relocating boats and RVs, vehicles, and other combustibles outside of this zone as well. So we want to keep that area clear and whatnot. So in addition to all the benefits of, you know, zone 0 and keeping that area clear, you know, there's a lot of secondary effects that firefighters are going to have to face due to that structure catching on fire, which, you know, in reality, a lot of us could have prevented. You know, on the left-hand side is, you know, a recent this or that from Nevada County Consolidated Fire from Patrick Mason. And I thought it was really interesting that he chose to prevent fire versus fight fire. You know, as a former firefighter, fighting fire was awesome. Preventing fires was a lot of work, and you know, just a lot of sweat and blood and tears, putting in a bunch of fuel breaks and whatnot. But I understand his position now, right? Fighting fire is very dangerous. It's very costly and it's very destructive. So preventing fire is something that we can all do. You know, consider yourself the #1 firefighter in the county, right? You just take care of your own property, or, you know, help others. You know, that's all part of fire prevention, and it's every firefighter's #1 goal. On the right-hand side is a picture of firefighters on a roof that's on fire. So, you know, because, you know, this prevention wasn't taking place, now the structure's on fire. Now these firefighters have to go suppress it. Now that you're putting them on the roof with the fire inside, and put them at significant risk. And every year we have firefighter fatalities. We have, you know, and a bunch of injuries due to these, you know, due to them having to do this work. In addition to that, you know, there's a lot of concerns with smoke and cancer. On the left-hand side, you see wildland firefighters, you know, out there, you know, working hard. You know, very typical of, you know, let's say the park fire. All those guys and gals are out there fighting fire in the smoke. You know, and there's kind of no way around and breathing that in. Nobody out there is wearing a self-contained breathing apparatus, you know, when fighting wildland fires. So when there's structures involved and all that smoke, they're breathing all those chemicals in, right? They're breathing all that toxic stuff in. And that's really leading to higher cancer rates in the firefighting industry. So just another negative effect of, you know, something we could potentially have avoided by homeowners and neighbors helping each other, you know, really take the zone 0 seriously. So hopefully those are some really good talking points and motivational points when you talk to your neighbors during a DSA V inspection. So right now we can go ahead and check out the video that went on earlier this year on defensible space. I'm not sure if the audio will play, but I hope it does. But if not, the visuals are impactful enough.
Are you playing the video, Ricky? We're not seeing it.
It's
really slow motion.
okay. It's not showing the video.
Not on the Zoom. I don't know if the people in the room can see it.
Okay.
But we Zoomers cannot.
Okay. It may not work. Let me post a link in the chat. Let me post a link in the chat, and then I don't know if either of you guys can play it on your end. It's just a Facebook link. It'll take you to Facebook, but you can just click the video on the back.
Takes about 30 minutes.
Great. Thanks, Ricky. Does anyone have questions?
Maybe just
I
turn on
have
the video.
question on the 5-foot zone. Is that from the walls of structure or from the eaves and overhang?
So that's gonna be any part of the building, eaves and overhang, considered at the edge of the structure. So 5 foot beyond that is what we're looking for. Eric, can you echo anything different or what you kind of interpret as far as what you guys are looking for?
Yes, same thing, the rear building overflow, community attachments.
Ricky, I have a clarification question.
Sure.
So to be clear, defensible space concepts, I've always been taught apply to all structures on the property. Does zone 0 apply just to the main house or to all structures on the property?
All structures on the property. We do have a definition for what constitutes being a structure. Like a fence on itself is not a structure. And so there's some standards to what a structure is, but we're looking for zone 0 on all structures, regardless of what it is, an outhouse, a shed, any structure that qualifies as being determined a structure is going to need to require defensible space, up to 100 feet, including zone 0.
Ricky, we have a question in the chat. Dennis is asking whether the same regulations and strictures apply if your home is constructed of concrete board, hardy board. And he points out that in the test, there was hardy board on the right instead of the T111 like you had on the left.
Correct. Yeah. So it's still going to apply. It's still a structure, regardless of its construction type and material. Hardy board siding isn't a free pass to put your house at risk because that radiant heat's still going to ignite items inside your house, right? That's where that radiant heat effect really takes place. Is it may not ignite the outside of your structure, but there's enough heat generated where it can ignite blinds, shades, other material in the house, and that'll lead to structure fire.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All
Yeah,
right.
so if anybody has any questions, I really highly suggest you guys reach out to county OES, or if you're in another jurisdiction, contact them directly. We're more than happy to provide direction, pointers, tips, tricks, and all the above. So we're here to help and really here to help you guys steer everybody in the right direction.
Ricky, we have one more question from Beth. What about huge 150-year-old ponderosa pines that the house was built around? They have been limbed up very high. So if it's just a tree trunk, she's asking.
Right. So if it's just a giant tree trunk, that's, in my opinion, not readily ignitable by embers. Those giant trees do have a really good way to protect themselves. And it usually takes some pretty good heat sustained around the tree to ignite that tree. So you really want to make sure the base of it's really clear. But are we going to make you take out that 200-foot ponderosa pine around your house? Probably not. So we're more looking at fine fuels. But we do want to make sure that that tree's limbed up, above 10 feet from the roof line. So limit up as high as you can, and just really protect everything around that tree. But for the most part, large diameter healthy trees are going to be not susceptible to embers.
Great, thank you.
We have a question in the back.
I would like to know what is recommended to be the safest way to store fuel for our snow blowers and tractors.
Were you able to hear that, Ricky?
No, it's too far
The
away from the
safest way
microphone.
to store fuel. That's correct.
Fuel for snow blowers and tractors.
Fuel, she wants to know the safest way to store fuel for snow blowers and tractors.
Yeah, safest way to store fuel for just like snow blowers and whatnot. Is that what the question was? Just
Yes.
as far away from the building as possible. Eric might have some helpful hints. Just, I don't know if you have a shed away from the structure. Typically you don't want to store fuel inside the house, but keep it as far away from the structure as possible. And if you do have to store fuel, I recommend not storing it at all. Typically, you want to use that fuel, one way or another. You know, and it just try not to store it at all, in my opinion.